Do you get what I say when I call Nolan Smith a swing player? There's no doubt that Nolan's a good player. There's no doubt in my mind that he's a good player. I don't believe he's unlocked his full potential there at UGA, and I can't guarantee that he will. But if he does, I think it changes the postseason fortunes for Georgia here this season. And I'm not quite so sure there's anybody else in this roster I would say that's more true for than Nolan here this year. Where would you land on something like that?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a movie comparison here. I think people that really watch and understand football, and certainly can do the same with Georgia, know that Nolan Smith is a good player. He's a little bit like the movie Everything Everywhere All the Time, which I think is one of the best movies I've seen this year. But obviously, it's sort of an indie favorite, hipster favorite, did not, get the, I think, sort of commercial appeal that, say, some of the blockbusters that you have seen out there be. If Nolan Smith turns into Top Gun Maverick and has that kind of a year where everyone in the country knows he is, no doubt about it, a good player, I do think that raises the ceiling of this defense because, if he's a guy racking up, doing all-around excellence like he does and getting the sack numbers 7.5, 8, maybe even 9, when you factor in with Robert Beal is going to give off the edge there as well on the other side, who I think is perhaps maybe a better pure pass rusher than what Nolan Smith is, you see the path to 40 sacks, which is the number we've so often thrown around on here. And so with that in mind, if you're getting elite production from Jalen Carter, you're getting elite production from Nolan Smith, I don't think you have some of the questions about replacing what Nakobe Dean gave you a season ago, replacing what Channing Tindall gave you, replacing what some of those very statistically productive players in that front seven gave you a season ago.
Yeah, I'm going to say this, and I hope I'm not incorrect in what I'm saying here, but I feel this is probably true. Like we saw last year how valuable it is for Georgia to have a great defensive line. But if you told me as someone who cheers for Georgia, hey, BA, you can have your wish of sort of an all-American level player at any position this year, 5 years from now, 15 years from now, if you give me my choice of having sort of an all-American Bednarik Award-winning level player at any position, I would choose outside linebacker. I would choose edge rusher because the job that the edge rusher primarily does is the most valuable commodity on that side of the ball. No disrespect to good defensive line. It's great to take away the run. And no disrespect to cornerback play, defensive back play. It's great to defend passes and make things tough when the ball is in the air. But the most valuable commodity on the defensive side is getting after the quarterback. If you told me I could have a great edge rusher, in Georgia's case, we'll just call him an outside linebacker. If you told me I could have that guy in any year, that's the best place to have a great player, I believe, on the defensive side of the football.
Now, normally I'd be inclined to agree with you, and if like the defensive lineman you're throwing out there is, what we saw from Trayvon Walker last year or Jordan Davis last year as well, undeniably great players. But if that defensive lineman is, say, Jalen Carter, and he's a player I believe is capable of getting 10 sacks the way that he plays and the way that I think he is best optimized and used, I think I take him as that sort of player because, and maybe this is the former offensive lineman in me, but when you are just getting blown up the middle on every play, or that is the potential of what could happen, it makes it so much worse for the rest of your offense there. And so, with Nolan Smith, there are some things you can do to maybe if he is productive, and you saw Georgia do this in the national championship game against Will Anderson in terms of rolling away from him, having a tight end and a running back in there to help the offensive tackle there as well. When a defensive tackle like Jalen Carter is just beating you up the middle time and time again, there's not a whole lot you can do. Similar to Aaron Donald at the NFL level, I think some of my favorite things from him, it's not so much to see his impact, him getting to the quarterback, which he obviously does very well, but it's the screenshots that you see where he's got like 4 offensive linemen on him, and every single other Rams defender is essentially singled up. I think Jalen Carter could potentially have that kind of an impact, but your point there is correct there as well. You look at the other two clear best teams in the college football playoff last year, Alabama and Michigan, no disrespect to Cincinnati, but the best defensive players on those two teams were edge rushers. And conversely, those edge rushers, Will Anderson and Aiden Hutchinson, were so good that they freed up things for Dallas Turner and for David Ojabo to be impact players there as well. And I think if Jalen Carter has the season I think he's capable of having, I think he can do the same thing for Georgia this year.
Is there anybody else that you kind of put in that category of swing guy for the Dogs in terms of he's got to have greatness as a ceiling. Not good. He's got to have greatness as a ceiling, and he's got to have some sort of meat left on the bone, and he kind of hasn't gotten there yet. Like who else would sort of meet the category of swing player as I'm defining? I feel like I've got at least one name on that. Do you have another kind of swing player that could change the fortune of the season for UGA?
I'll give you one offense and one defense,
Okay.
and I'll start on the defensive side of the ball here. I'm going to go Chris Smith, a guy who has just consistently gotten better every time he's seen the field. And, because he wasn't the megastar recruit, because I believe this is his 5th year back at UGA, he doesn't necessarily have some of the recognition that, say, 5-star Jalen Carter, 5-star Keely Ringo, 5-star Nolan Smith has. But, he had an interception in the national championship game last year against Alabama. He had an interception returned for a touchdown in the big game against Clemson. He's a guy that has shown that he's had the ability to make plays this year, and given with Lewis Cine moving on to the next level, I do think he is a safety that has shown some playmaking ability, and with a greater opportunity in this Georgia defense to do so, I think he's got a chance to showcase that, and if he does that, I think the talent is there for him to be one of the better safeties in America, something Georgia has always pretty much consistently had under Kirby Smart.
Can I stop you before you mention your next name? Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. So, and I want to hear your offensive name too, but I don't want to lose track of this. So if you look at Georgia under Kirby Smart, like their track record at safety is remarkable. Obviously we know what Lewis Cine was, became first-round pick. We know what Richard LeCount was. Barring injury, he would have been a much higher draft pick, but his value to Georgia was well established.
He was one of the best defensive players in the country his last year before that injury.
Completely. People kind of forget J.R. Reed was a first-team AP All-American, and he was like a sort of a transfer that came to Georgia with a little fanfare and became a first-team All-American, playing safety. Do you think Christopher Smith belongs in that same lineage? Could Smith have sort of like typical Georgia safety year? Is he good enough to be in that lineage?
I absolutely think so. You think J.R. Reed even, I think that's maybe a template that he could follow. J.R. made the iconic interception in the home game against Notre Dame where he's sliding in out of nowhere to pick off a pass there that day from Ian Book. I think you've seen Chris Smith has the ability to make those plays. Obviously, the touchdown against Clemson comes to mind, and even the interception last year against Alabama. He's, to me, shown enough playmaking ability already. I think he has the potential to do that. As far as
offensive guy,
the offensive name that I'm going to go with here, and we've talked about him before, I think it's Kearis Jackson. This is a guy I get a feeling I'm probably a good bit higher on than a number of other people on the beat. But I was really, really impressed with what I saw out of him in the spring game this year. And if you're telling me that you're getting that Kearis Jackson to be healthy for all 15 games, I believe you have a dynamic difference maker at that wide receiver position. He looked noticeably faster than we had seen him really at any point in the 2021 season and probably even the 2020 season as well. And, he himself, 2018 signee, he's basically a man at this point. And so I think when you factor that in as well, I've said I think Kearis is going to lead this team in receiving this year. If he does that, I think he's going to need to get to 850, 900 yards receiving, and that's sort of the number you've thrown out there as well. And if he's doing that and getting those types of numbers, in addition to what we expect from these Georgia tight ends this year, that's an AP first-team All-SEC type wide receiver potentially, or at least certainly a guy that's going to get mentioned on there. And so I do think that do not forget about Kearis Jackson. As much talent as there is in that pass-catching core for Georgia this year, I think he is a guy because of the injury, and specifically the injury he had when it happened last year, never really allowed him to get going. I think he's absolutely a guy that can make a difference for Georgia this year.
If you are right about this, you have every opportunity on this show to spike the football as much as you want to, because you're the only one that I know that's saying, at any given moment, there are 8 million people saying everything about Georgia football literally all the time. You're the only one I know who's this high on Kearis Jackson. And I don't mean that as a disrespect to Kearis, because I think there's a lot to like about Kearis Jackson. But my honest assessment of this and why your statement is so eyebrow-raising to me is I just don't know if the ceiling for Kearis is high enough for me to put him in the category of what I'm thinking of as the swing player. To me, to be the swing player, you've got to have a ceiling that's like first-round pick. And that's why, for me, my offensive guy might be more like an Arik Gilbert more so than a Kearis Jackson. And listen, I think Kearis is a great player. I think he's tough as nails. I think he's going to have some big moments for Georgia this year, almost certainly. But the one thing that you seem to think is true, and as a Georgia fan, I hope you're right and I hope I'm wrong, but the thing that you seem to think is true is you seem to see a higher ceiling there than maybe I'm sure that exists with Jackson, which I think is a fascinating discussion.